the day, 2021, for the Hughes property in Tonopah, Nevada, really was an eye-opener because the more we put into this project, the more I get the feeling that we're only just beginning to scratch the surface, and it's going to take a lot more work to see what we really have.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside the Market Extra. We are more than honored to be sitting down today with Galen McNamara. He is the CEO and president of Summa Silver. Thank you so much, Galen, for joining us today.
Thanks, Justin. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Pleasure's all ours. So can you tell us what you've seen so far this year at Summa Silver as we close the year out?
Yeah, you know what? I look back on 2021, and of course, time always flies, right? Before you know it, the year is over. So, now is a good time for me to take stock on what we've done in 2021. And I look back to the beginning of the year, where we were at then versus where we're at now. So, we got a lot of high value drilling done. Firstly, on our project in Nevada, I called the Hughes project, which is the eastern half of the famous historic Tonopah mining district, where we drilled 4 targets there over a strike length of 3.5 kilometers and hit high grade silver and gold mineralization on across those targets on all 4 of them. So I look back to something like, hey, on one side of the property we're hitting grades of 6 meters of, say, 500 grams per ton on the western part of the property. The central part of the property we're hitting very high grades, grades in excess of 11, pushing 12,000 grams per ton silver equivalent around the historic Belmont mine. And then even out to the east, where we're drilling at the Ruby target, which is a 1.3 kilometer step out from the historic part of this district. And we're seeing some of the highest, or the strongest hydrothermal alteration that I've ever seen. And when I say alteration, that's basically just geologist code for smoke. And some very interesting looking veins. Now, of course, the assays are still pending on those ones. But at the end of the day, 2021 for the Hughes property in Tonopah, Nevada, really was an eye opener because the more we put into this project, the more I get the feeling that we're only just beginning to scratch the surface, and it's going to take a lot more work to see what we really have. But therein lies the opportunity, right? Because I think in this district, which historically produced about 175 million ounces of silver and almost 2 million ounces of gold, at grades of in excess of 1,200 grams per ton silver equivalent, we're just starting to scratch the surface on what could be remaining there. And for us, I'm trying to find that next 100 million ounces, that next 200 million ounces. So that's Tonopah. But of course, there's also a second project, and I only say it's a second project because we only just started drilling it in the last couple months in Mogollon, New Mexico. This is another one of these historic, famous, if you will, high-grade mining districts that hasn't really seen any modern exploration. So we just started drilling there under 2 months ago, and what we've reported so far is the first hole hit a vein zone that was 50 meters wide. So now, we don't expect all of that to carry high-grade mineralization or even all of it to be mineralized. But there's discrete zones of obviously mineralized stuff, and we showed that in the core photos that we released a couple weeks ago. So really, though, what that says is that, hey, there's a significant mineralizing system here that begs for a lot of work. So that's where we're at this year, is 2, I think, projects that have the potential to be a number 1 project for any exploration or any development company.
You put silver up front in your branding. Why is that?
Well, you know what? So both of these projects are silver and gold focused, but let's just start in Tonopah, where in the ground it's about 100 grams per ton of silver for 1 gram of ton gold, 1 gram per ton gold. So it's 100-to-1 ratio in the ground. But translate that into value, and it's probably somewhere 60-40 to 70-30 silver to gold. So that's the one project. The New Mexico project, Mogollon, New Mexico, that one's a little different, where it's probably closer to like 50-50, or maybe a little bit weighted towards silver. But I think why we branded towards silver, silver projects in general are very, very difficult to find, number 1. So that was basically the main reason. They are silver, especially Tonopah is a primary silver district. But also in terms of in that regard, just to take that thought to the next step, silver projects are hard to find. Silver projects in Nevada in the Western US are really hard to find, right? So that's just another, that's not really why we're called Summa Silver, but that's something I always like to cover when I'm talking about it. So with that in mind, and with that in mind, because silver projects are really hard to find, while silver companies are also, few and far between, with respect to some of the gold developers.
What are you looking at out of 2022 in terms of both the market and at Summa Silver?
Yeah, so I think the first question is the market, and for companies like ours, we live and die with the precious metals markets, right? And that's fine, and that's what we signed up for. So I look at what's going on from an inflation stance, not to get too far into the weeds, but we're looking at those CPI numbers that are, very, very high. I don't think that's going to change. I also know that, between now and when the pandemic started, 40% of all US dollars in circulation were printed. So I mean, think about that in terms of inflation. There's only really one way to go there, and we're just starting to see it now. So I think that is an interesting facet to the precious metal story. But also silver more specifically, it's really becoming an ESG metal in that substantial amounts of silver are going to need to be used if we do make a transition to EVs in the next several decades. I mean, we're talking from the demand side, potentially doubling demand, and I think that gets, very, very, silver supply gets pretty tight pretty quick. So my opinion is that, and I don't know when this is going to happen, when silver starts to run and it starts to think about, getting 25, 28, maybe $30, like, it's not going to stop. It's probably only going to continue. And then say from 30 to 50 should happen very quickly, in my opinion. So that's, my market feeling right now. In terms of a plan for us, well, I mean, we've got 2 high-grade projects with a lot of high-grade silver on both of them, that we don't know, where the mineralization ends. So that's a perfect setup for drilling a bunch of meters, and really honing in on really defining the size of these high-grade zones. For me, I'm a geologist, and for the team, I mean, for us, you give us a few holes that are high grade, and that's just like kind of like license to drill, because we know exactly where to take it from there, and that's what we're going to do, and that means a lot of drilling.
Anything else people should know about Summa Silver as we head into 2022?
Yeah, that's a good kind of overarching question. Say, I mean, for us in 2022, like I just said, 2 very high grade, potentially very significant projects that have, in my experience as a geologist, really have the potential to start showing, something very significant. I'm not looking for 10 million ounces. I'm looking for 100 million ounces. So, for us, that's what we're going to do. We're going to march towards, those types of goals, by systematically and in a very measured way, drilling what I anticipate to be substantial intersections for the entire year.
We've had the honor today of sitting down on Inside the Markets Extra, presented by StockPulse.com, with Galen McNamara. Galen is the CEO of Summa Silver. Thank you so much, Galen, for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me on the show to do the quick update.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Markets, presented by StockPulse.com.